Hi, and welcome to Stream of Conscience. I'm John Hartwell, your host. The show is brought to you by Democracy for America, Fairfield County, and we're always looking for new members. Today we've got Erik Williams, a friend of mine, and he's here as the Executive Director of NORML, that's N-O-R-M-L, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws.
Thanks for having me, John.
Well, we're glad to have you here. And just a brief note, when I ran for State Senate in 2008 and 2010, Erik was my communications director and put together a lot of my material. So we've worked together in the past, but today we are simply here as in an interview situation to talk about NORML, which is something that's new for you.
It is new for me. Well, it's new for me in that I am putting myself and my face out there. I've actually been involved with NORML on a national level for quite some time, doing some pro bono work, involved in the movement, but it wasn't until pretty much after this past election cycle that I decided it was time to put up or shut up and actually get out there and do some work, and decided that yes, I was going to reconstitute a new chapter of Connecticut NORML. So I founded that and became executive director this year.
And what is it that has brought you to this particular issue? There are lots of issues out there.
Well, this particular issue, I was brought to it in a very immature way, and that being in high school and college with where a lot of persons smoked pot. It was something that came out, and at that point I had heard a lot of the stories of medicinal marijuana. I thought it was kind of just an excuse, if you will, but I had also begun working in a congressman's office when I was in college, and was hearing a lot of stories of persons who really had their lives thrown away in a lot of instances because they were caught with a joint or a small amount of marijuana. Friends of mine who lost their college aid, their federal student loans, because they had been convicted of having a small amount of marijuana. And really just saw the absolutely ridiculous laws that were out there, considering all the persons who were getting completely drunk every single weekend, causing trouble, and then I saw that it was just a reasonable alternative. So that's how I started.
Okay. And
it really wasn't until a few years later that I begun to see how incredibly silly and hypocritical the marijuana prohibition laws were. Begun to find out a lot more about medicinal marijuana. Knew some persons who had had cancer, knew some of the things that they were going through. Also, I had been involved with a lot of charitable AIDS and HIV/AIDS work, and I knew that persons in hospices were smoking marijuana so they could eat, so they could dull their pain.
Right.
And so with that, that's really where I wanted to get involved. I also saw this as a tremendous industry that could help our economy. And moreover, above all else, it's about civil liberties and personal freedom, and responsible adults being able to do what they want, in addition to the real medicinal benefits of smoking or ingesting or inhaling or bringing marijuana into your body.
So you see it on one hand as a matter for decriminalization of the current laws because of the impact that it has often on young people. Secondly, the use of medical marijuana in order to alleviate pain and suffering. And thirdly, as simply a basic civil right that people should be allowed to medicate themselves if they wish, with drugs which don't have any impact on someone else.
That's exactly right. It's the three-prong approach. I think that there's definitely a way that we need to go about this within our state, within our society, and moreover, the most important thing is that it's done responsibly. But when it gets right down to it, I think the single best thing that we could do in this country is end the drug war and legalize marijuana like alcohol. It would really just put a huge boost into our economy. It would take a lot of persons out of our prisons. It would take persons who are responsibly using marijuana and make them not criminals any longer.
So let's start with the decriminalization piece.
Yes.
Right now, marijuana is an illegal substance at the federal level and an illegal substance at the state level.
And it will remain that way. What they've done, the legislature has just done, is passed the decriminalization of small amounts of marijuana. Now, it does not in any way make it legal. All it says is, in a lot of ways, makes the penalty fit the crime, as it's still a crime to smoke marijuana or to to use marijuana. Well, what it's doing now is it's changing it from a crime down to a fine. You know, a lot of people have brought up the idea, I think it was Jimmy Carter who first said that the punishment should not be worse than the crime.
Right.
Well, that's really what we've had in this country with this drug war and really, I mean, the declaration by Richard Nixon of war on the American population 40 years ago last week, that's a real horrible thing that's devastated communities. I'd say by far it's the most racist law that we have on our books today, maybe in the history of our country.
How can you back that up? That's a very strong statement.
Well, you can back that up when you look at the statistics. The statistics show that 70% of drug users in the United States are white, yet 70% of the persons who are serving prison time for drug sentences are persons of color.
So most of the drug users in the U.S., and would that be all drug users or just marijuana?
That would be, yes.
All drug users?
Yes.
Most of the drug users in this country are white, but most of the people who are put in jail are non-white?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Clearly that's a problem. You would see that as some evidence of racism. I think that that's a fair statement.
I think that's one of the most statistically perfect examples of a racist policy.
Now, when you break down drug use like that, I think a lot of the Caucasians who are using drugs are using methamphetamines and are found in rural areas and not in cities. And I think the reverse is true of drugs that are being used in the cities. Does that make sense?
I would say that might be true. I'm not exactly sure of the statistics, and I wouldn't want to put that out there falsely. Now, let me just be clear as we're going down this path here. I represent NORML. We represent the responsible use of marijuana among adults. There are clearly drugs where I believe that if you're going to be using those drugs, you are an addict. I don't think that personally, I don't believe that there's a responsible way to use heroin. I don't think there's a responsible way to use some of this crystal meth that people are using, or to use crack cocaine. There's not a responsible way to use that. But we're talking about a plant that grows, that most of our forefathers, our founding fathers, rather, actually used and grew.
Really?
Well, George Washington was a hemp farmer. That was his main crop. When you look at those things and you look at why it was why Prohibition kicked it in, it was mostly fear. It was the cotton industry. Those are the kind of things that started it, and it's fear that was that's kept it going for 40 years now.
So what would you see as an ideal way to approach this drug?
Legalize marijuana like alcohol. It's very, very simple.
So legalizing it like alcohol means that it's grown by anyone who wants to grow it?
Well, it would have to be just like alcohol. You can't go and have stills in your backyard.
Okay.
There needs to be responsible use for it.
So there's controlled production?
Controlled production,
and
controlled distribution, absolutely.
Okay, and then taxed?
Absolutely taxed.
And who would be allowed to purchase?
Adults.
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 And how much would they be allowed to purchase?
I don't think that there should be any restriction on it whatsoever, just like there is with alcohol. If someone wants to buy a pound of marijuana once a year and not go to the store again, I would have absolutely no problem with that. I've been into many wine cellars where persons have hundreds, if not thousands, of cases or bottles of wine. There's no issue with that, and that doesn't make them a wine dealer operating outside of the Liquor Control Act or outside of any of the regulations that we have regarding alcohol. I think when it gets right down to it, that there's a responsible way to do it, that there's a way to keep it out of the hands of children, that there's a way to do that by speaking with them responsibly and not just instilling fear in them.
Now, of course, the comeback always is that, well, marijuana may not be so bad, although there are people out there who claim that it in fact is addictive. I find that not supported by the facts, but there are people who believe that. But let's say for a moment that marijuana is not addictive. There are lots of people who will claim that marijuana in fact is a gateway drug, and that you begin with marijuana and you end up with crack cocaine or with heroin, and you're shooting up and committing crimes, and it's an awful situation for you as a human being as well as for society.
Well, let's be clear. Addiction is something that is not responsible use in any way, shape, or form. Persons do, the numbers are pegged at between 1% and 3% of marijuana users who claim that they, or feel that they are addicted. Those are persons who should be dealt with. I don't believe those numbers whatsoever. I don't think you can be addicted to marijuana, but regardless. And now, when it gets right down to the gateway drug, that is an absolute falsehood. The bottom line is, if you were to ask anyone who's gone down the path of having a gateway drug, ended up on crack cocaine or methamphetamines or something like that, no one starts with marijuana. They start with other drugs, like cigarettes, like alcohol. No one's starting with a joint when they haven't had a drink at some point. In fact, one of the main opponents of the marijuana reform laws here in Connecticut this year brought out a person who said that their son had used marijuana as a gateway drug. Well, the fact remains that that person actually did start smoking and drinking. And time after time, when persons are trotted out in front of the cameras to spread some more fear, we do find that that is the case. The persons have, in fact, started with nicotine, and they've started with alcohol.
So from your point of view and from the point of view of NORML, there really isn't any significant difference in the toxicity, the power, the concern around alcohol and marijuana.
Well, the only big difference is that alcohol is much, much, much worse for you.
Okay.
It's much worse for you. There are hundreds of thousands of alcohol-related deaths every single year, and there's yet to be a single death attributed to marijuana in this country. They're just not attributed to marijuana. And we also see horrific liver disease. There is much, much stronger addiction to alcohol.
Alcohol is legal and marijuana isn't. So, if there's going to be abuse, it's going to be more easily abused at this moment in terms of alcohol.
Well, that's if you're just talking about the legal versus the illegal side. I guess there's easier access for adults to alcohol than marijuana. That's what I'm saying.
So there's more likely to be some abuse there because because it's more easily accessible.
Chemically, though, it's much worse to be a heavy user of alcohol than a heavy user of marijuana.
Okay, so in this session of the state legislature, there was a decriminalization bill that was on the table, and there was a medical marijuana bill on the table, and we actually haven't talked about medical marijuana. So let's just hold that for a moment and talk about the decriminalization bill that was passed and is on its way to Governor Malloy.
Yes. The bill that was passed by the legislature essentially does take out, takes the criminal penalties out of a small amount of marijuana. A small amount of marijuana is defined as a ½ ounce or less. And essentially what this does is take persons, a lot of our young folks who are getting caught with a small amount of marijuana, persons who are clearly using it for their personal use, not selling, not with children, nothing like that. And if they're caught, now they are essentially issued a fine, a ticket, for their first offense. Their second offense, they would be issued, I believe the fine is about $150. The second offense, I believe it's $200 to $500. There's some discretion within there. And the third and all subsequent offenses would be $500. And at that point, you're also ordered to enter into some sort of program. We actually agree with that. I think, frankly, that if there's someone who is caught 3 times by the police with a small amount of marijuana, that's someone who has a problem. And I think that that is someone that should seek some sort of treatment.
The problem is getting caught, or the problem is
the problem is that they don't have the ability to use marijuana responsibly.
Okay.
Responsible use. I don't think that anyone who's using marijuana responsibly, that being in the privacy of their own home, is going to be caught. Is going to be caught.
Right. So they're not out driving around. They're not at a concert with other people where they may be influencing someone else. So for you, responsible use is probably in the home, in private, and not out in public. Is that
exactly? I think it goes a lot of the ways that you look at alcohol right now.
Mm-hmm.
If there's at a concert someone smokes a joint at a concert, and believe me, I've spoken with an awful lot of very responsible adults and pillars of our community, if you will, who've had this horrible nightmare of being caught smoking a joint for maybe the first time in 15 or 20 years at a concert. All of a sudden their life is thrown into complete turmoil.
Right.
I have one member in particular who was caught at a concert. He's 52 years old, was caught at a concert smoking a joint that wasn't his. Someone passed it over to him, but it was in his possession.
Right.
He was a trader on Wall Street, lost his license, lost his job, and now for the rest of his life, he's going to have to put on every single job application that, yes, I was arrested and convicted of a felony. That's a real detriment to them, and for the rest of their life, it takes an otherwise extremely productive member of our society, father of two, and just threw his life into turmoil for a joint.
So in the decriminalization that was passed, it deals with a half an ounce or less.
Correct.
And it levies a fine rather than a possible prison sentence.
Rather than a possible prison sentence.
Any differentiation between adults and those who are not adults?
Thanks for asking that question. Yes, there is. Frankly, if it's under 18, then it's a whole different situation dealing with children who are breaking the law. I think that's definitely it's actually something that NORML fought for as well. Again, we believe it's responsible use among adults and certainly not children. One of the things that's a bit of a shame is between 18 and 21, they differentiated between that. Personally, I think that's kind of hypocritical if someone can vote and die for their country, but they can't be treated like an adult in all situations.
They can't drink.
They can't. Well, I also think that's fairly hypocritical, but we won't get there as well. But if they are between 18 and 21 and they're caught, they also lose their license. I believe it's for 60 days.
Okay.
So there are enhanced penalties there as well.
And if they're under 18?
If they're under 18, it's a whole different process, but it's you know, they're not treated in the adult criminal courts as any way, but they're going to have to seek treatment. Parents are going to have to get involved, and it's dealt with in another manner.
So that bill was passed, and I believe that Governor Malloy intends to sign it.
Governor Malloy will sign it.
Yes.
In fact, it was his bill.
It was his bill.
Correct.
And the state Senate, if I remember correctly, Lieutenant Governor Wyman actually had to break an 18-18 tie.
Yes, her first.
In order to pass that bill. So in fact, it was not a straight party line vote. I think all the Republicans voted against it in the state Senate, and some Democrats as well.
Correct.
And Lieutenant Governor Wyman voted in favor of it, so that moved it on. It passed the House. It's now on its way to the governor, and he's going to sign that bill. And it's going to take effect when?
July 1st.
July 1st, so
yes.
right around the corner.
Right around the corner.
Okay, and then there was another bill, though, that didn't succeed. And
yes.
you actually believed that it was an easier bill to pass. That was the medical marijuana bill. So tell us what exactly was in that bill and why didn't it go any further?
Well, first of all, I say it was a bittersweet victory to win the decriminalization of small amounts of marijuana, but not get the legalization of medical marijuana. And the big reason for that is that the legalization of medical marijuana helps people now. There are hundreds and hundreds of persons who are members of my organization who I speak with on a daily basis who tell me just heart-wrenching stories of the afflictions that they're going through. They're suffering in ways that you and I hope we never have to.
Sure.
And then for the state government to then put 186 legislators between that patient and their doctor and say, no, you will not get relief. You are going to be a criminal for taking your medicine. That's absolutely ridiculous, and frankly, a lot of the legislature saw it that way as well. We know that we had the votes to pass. For a variety of reasons, none of which I really know, it didn't get called in the Senate, but we know we had a large majority, a bipartisan.
Did it pass in the House?
It didn't get to the House. It was a Senate bill, so it had to start in the Senate. But we know we had at least 21, possibly 23 or 24 votes in the Senate, and an overwhelming majority in the House who would have supported the bill as well, and of course the governor would have signed that.
Governor would have signed this one as well. So exactly what was being proposed, and how does that compare with the current law there are lots of other states that already have medical marijuana laws.
There are 16 states that have legalized medical marijuana. That does not mean that there's 16 states in which you can get medical marijuana.
Okay.
A lot of states, they legalize medical marijuana, but then they don't have any way for the patients to get access to their medicine. So it's almost like dangling the carrot in front of someone and never letting them take a bite.
But in California, they have medical marijuana dispensaries all over the state.
Right.
And you get basically a note from your doctor, a prescription, which is a note from your doctor, and you're allowed to buy medical marijuana up to a certain amount. I'm not even sure what that is.
I'm not sure what the exact amount is. And yes, California was the first one out of the gate to do that. And there's a lot wrong with what California has done. But there's also some good things that we've seen from there. We've seen some amazing science come out of it. Inject capitalism into this, and you see just amazing leaps forward.
Which we want to talk about in a minute, injecting capitalism into this process. So, in Connecticut, what was proposed?
Well, let me be, it's a little bit confusing here in the process, but there was one law that was, or one bill rather, that was proposed, and then it was intended to have a strike-all amendment, meaning all the language would be thrown out and new language would be put in if it got to the floor for a vote.
Right.
And in that, we had a variety of things. First of all, there were a list of specific debilitating illnesses which would be covered. And these included things like MS and cancer and glaucoma and HIV, AIDS, and PTSD, a variety of things where it's perfectly clear that there's real relief that can be had from that. Right. Crohn's disease is another one as well. Then there was also going to be a panel of doctors.
So you couldn't just go to one doctor and
No. What it would say is if you had one of these diseases, you could get a medical card. And then from your doctor, if your doctor prescribed it and you had a medical card, then you could have access to medical marijuana. But that didn't cover everything, and the legislature and the persons who were helping to work on the bill were smart enough to realize that they didn't know everything, and it was best to have doctors make the decisions as to whether or not there would be more more illnesses and ailments added to the debilitating diseases.
So the panel is to add more.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And what was the distribution method?
The distribution method was essentially left to the Department of Consumer Protection. So what it would be was the policy of that there is a medicinal use for for marijuana, and so they would come up with a certain amount of dispensaries that would be located throughout the state in secure locations, secure growth.
Actually run by the state?
They would not be run by the state. They would be run by private, either for-profit or not-for-profit groups, and it would be up to the Department of Consumer Protection to come up with the regulations.
And the total out of this, though, is that if both of these were done, if you were able to completely decriminalize marijuana, which you'd like to do, hasn't happened yet, but you'd like to do, and you'd like to be able to set up a medical marijuana dispensary system around the state. Clearly, the amount of marijuana being sold legally would, being sold at all, would increase, and you'd be able to tax it. So how would that affect the finances of the government? Because everybody's concerned these days with taxes and with revenues and debts and deficits.
I would say that in terms of straight up tax revenue, to give a very conservative number, I'd say that you could probably get up to $50–60 million if you were to look at, if you wanted to go for that, and that would include licensing fees for dispensaries and growers and anyone else who wanted to use it for example, making tinctures or oils or making baked goods, things, or any kind of cooking whatsoever with it. I think conservatively you could bring in about $60 million on a legalization of medical marijuana. Now, decriminalizing completely marijuana does not make it legal to sell or possess. You would need to actually legalize it.
Right.
So there's a clear distinction there. But I can tell you from the amount of persons who have contacted me, whether they be hedge funds or real estate investment trusts or business persons, pharmaceutical companies, there are hundreds of millions of dollars worth of investment, people who would like to get into this business of supplying medicine to persons. It's not a week has gone by over the past few months that I haven't gotten a call from someone who would like to get into the business. And it's not just the tax dollars. It's also the jobs that it creates.
Right.
There's a lot of jobs that go in with this, and it's never a job that's going to leave our state borders. As long as the federal government still says it's illegal, everything would have to take place within our own state borders. So it's not like we're going to be fighting Rhode Island or New York.
The likelihood of making a change at the national level is not very high at this point.
It's not very high at this point, although I must say that just today there was a federal, for the first time ever in Congress, there was a federal legalization of marijuana act was just introduced, and that was co-sponsored by Ron Paul and Barney Frank.
Ron Paul and Barney Frank, a very interesting and non-intuitive political combination.
Exactly. If that's not a picture of bipartisanship, then I don't know what one is.
It really is. Well, Eric, thank you very much for coming in and talking with us today. This has been very, very interesting.
Thanks for having me.
I'd love to have you back again, and we'll talk more about this at another time.
I'll come back anytime.
Right. So our guest today has been Erik Williams. He is the Executive Director of NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, but it could be the National Organization for Responsible Marijuana Laws as well. He's hit that theme a lot. So thanks again, Erik, for coming in. I'm John Hartwell, and this has been Stream of Conscience, brought to you by Democracy for America, Fairfield County. We're a progressive grassroots political group, and we're always looking for new members. See you again soon.